Ever wondered why the same $20 doesn't seem to buy as much as it used to? Welcome to the mystery of the shrinking $20 bill. This isn't a magic trick or a sleight of hand, but rather a reality we all face due to a concept known as inflation. Inflation, in simplest terms, is what happens when the value of money decreases over time. Let's take a snapshot of today. Right now, you've got a crisp $20 bill in your pocket. You can head out, catch the latest blockbuster at your local cinema, and maybe even have enough left over for a small snack. Sounds like a pretty good deal, right? But let's fast forward to the same day next year. You're excited to watch another must-see movie, and you've got the same $20 bill in your pocket. You get to the ticket counter, hand over your money, and suddenly, there's not enough left for that snack you were looking forward to. You might scratch your head, wondering what happened. The bill didn't physically shrink, but its purchasing power or the amount it can buy seems to have diminished. This is inflation at work. The same $20 that once bought you a movie ticket and a snack now only covers the cost of the ticket. Now you might be wondering why this happens. Why does your $20 bill lose some of its power? The answer isn't straightforward, as several factors come into play, all intertwining to form the complex web that is our economy. These factors range from supply and demand dynamics, the cost of producing goods and services, to the amount of money circulating in the economy. All these factors and more contribute to the decrease in the value of our money over time, a phenomenon we refer to as inflation. So we see that inflation can shrink the value of your money, but why does this happen? Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the factors that drive inflation in the next scenes. Understanding these factors can help us make smarter decisions about how we use our money, ensuring it doesn't lose all its power while it's still in our pockets. Inflation's first accomplice is none other than the law of demand and supply. Now, let's imagine a scene. You're a hardcore fan of a chart-topping pop band. You've been saving up from your part-time job, waiting for their concert tickets to go on sale. But when the day finally arrives, the tickets sell out quicker than you can say encore. Suddenly, tickets are popping up on resale sites, but at prices much higher than the original. This, my friends, is a perfect demonstration of the law of demand and supply in action, and it's one of the key drivers of inflation. So what's happening here? Simply put, the demand for these concert tickets far outweighs the supply. When there's a high demand for a product like these concert tickets and there isn't enough to go around, people are willing to pay more to get their hands on them. As a result, sellers can hike up the prices, knowing that fans will still be willing to buy. But it's not just concert tickets. This principle applies to everything from the latest smartphone to the trendiest sneakers. When the newest model drops and everyone is scrambling to get one, the demand is high. If the manufacturer can't keep up with the demand or intentionally limits the supply to create a sense of exclusivity, prices can soar. This kind of inflation, driven by demand and supply, can be volatile and unpredictable. It can cause prices to fluctuate wildly, creating what some economists call an inflation roller coaster. One minute you're at the top, with prices peaking, and the next you're hurtling down as demand drops off or supply increases. Remember, inflation isn't always a bad thing. A moderate amount of inflation is a sign of a healthy, growing economy. But when prices rise too quickly or too high, it can become a problem. It can make everyday goods and services more expensive, and make your hard-earned money worth less. As you can see, when demand outstrips supply, prices can skyrocket. Another important player in the inflation game is the cost of production. Now let's take a moment to think about how the things we buy are made. Every product, from the t-shirt you're wearing to the smartphone you're probably holding right now, comes with a cost of production. This includes the cost of materials, labor, and other resources needed to make and deliver the product to you. Now, imagine a world where the price of cotton skyrockets. Cotton, as you may know, is a key ingredient in the production of all kinds of clothing, including our everyday t-shirts. So, when the price of cotton shoots up, guess what follows suit? That's right, the cost of producing those t-shirts also rises. But companies aren't in the habit of eating up these extra costs. Instead, they pass them on to us, the consumers. So suddenly that comfy tee you've been eyeing in your favorite store is looking a little pricier than before. And it's not just about t-shirts. This scenario applies to every product out there. If the price of steel goes up, your next car or bike might be more expensive. If the cost of cocoa beans rises, your favorite chocolate bar could start burning a bigger hole in your pocket. You see where this is going, right? This is a classic example of cost-push inflation, where increased production costs lead to higher prices for goods and services. When these price increases become widespread across many sectors of the economy, you have inflation on your hands. And just like that, the $20 bill you have today doesn't stretch as far as it did before. That movie and snack combo, it's now just a movie ticket. That's the impact of inflation, and it's driven in part by the rising cost of production. So, the next time you notice the price of your favorite product going up, remember to consider the cost of producing it. It's not always about greedy corporations wanting to make an extra buck. Sometimes it's about the increased costs they have to bear to bring that product to your hands. When it costs more to make something, you can bet that the price tag will reflect that. What happens when there's suddenly more money around? Let's consider this question for a moment. This scenario might initially seem like a dream come true. More money to spend, more things to buy, right? However, the reality is a bit more complex. In economics, it's not just about how much money you have, but also how much money is available overall. If there's a surge in the amount of money flowing around, it can actually lead to inflation. But how does this work? To understand this, let's imagine a situation where everyone suddenly has twice as much money. Sounds great, doesn't it? Well, here's the catch. With more money in their pockets, people are generally willing to pay more for the same goods and services. This is simply because they can afford to do so. Now let's think about this from a seller's perspective. If a seller knows that people have more money and are willing to pay more, they might be tempted to increase their prices. After all, it's a great opportunity to make more profit. This is a classic example of supply and demand at work. When prices increase due to a rise in the amount of money in circulation, we call this inflation. This kind of inflation is often referred to as demand pull inflation because it's the increased demand fueled by more available money that's pulling the prices up. However, it's important to remember that while having more money might feel good in the short term, inflation means that your money won't go as far in the future. That's because as prices rise, the purchasing power of your money decreases. So, while a flood of money might seem like a good thing at first glance, it's not necessarily a boon. When money flows freely, it can lead to increased prices and decreased purchasing power, both hallmarks of inflation. And so we see, when money flows freely, prices tend to rise. Who's in charge of keeping inflation in check? Now that's a question worth asking. Enter the guardians of inflation, governments and central banks. These institutions are the custodians of our economies, ensuring that inflation doesn't spiral out of control. They have a toolkit of measures at their disposal. One of the most powerful tools? Interest rates. Imagine the economy as a car. The interest rate is like the accelerator or brake. When the economy needs a boost, central banks lower interest rates, making it cheaper to borrow money. This encourages spending and investment, stimulating the economy. Conversely, when inflation is too high, central banks raise interest rates, making borrowing more expensive, which can slow down spending and cool off the economy. These guardians, like the Federal Reserve in the United States, constantly monitor the economy's vital signs. They tweak and adjust, aiming to strike a delicate balance. Their goal? To keep inflation in a sweet spot, not too high, not too low. These guardians work hard to keep inflation in a sweet spot. So, how does inflation affect you and me? Every day inflation subtly changes our lives, like a silent puppeteer pulling the economic strings. It's like an invisible tax that chips away at our purchasing power. Your favorite coffee might cost a bit more, or that apartment you've been eyeing suddenly seems pricier. But it's not just about prices. Our salaries too are affected by inflation. Companies often adjust their employees' wages based on inflation rates to maintain the real value of their incomes. Inflation also influences government policies. If inflation is too high, central banks may hike interest rates to cool down the economy. And if it's too low, they might loosen their monetary policies to stimulate growth. Inflation is the economic tide that lifts and sinks all boats, shaping our financial lives in ways we may not even realize. Understanding inflation can make a big difference in how we save, spend, and invest for our future.